Marcus Chen had always been different. While other kids collected baseball cards or video games, he spent his afternoons hunched over workbenches in his garage, crafting intricate wooden toys and gadgets that seemed to come alive in his hands. But being different in Millbrook, Ohio, wasn't exactly celebrated. And when the most important people in his life started throwing away everything he poured his heart into, Marcus learned a painful lesson about how the world sees those who dare to dream differently. What he didn't know was that one day those same discarded creations would save lives and make him a hero the entire nation would come to know. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The first time Marcus Chen picked up a piece of wood, he was 7 years old. His grandfather David had been teaching him basic carpentry in the dusty garage behind their modest house on Elm Street. What started as simple lessons in measuring and cutting quickly revealed something extraordinary. Marcus didn't just follow instructions, he improved them. He'd look at a basic birdhouse plan and somehow know exactly how to make the entrance more welcoming, the perch more stable, the roof more weatherproof. By age 10, Marcus was creating toys that left adults speechless. His wooden puzzle boxes weren't just challenging. They were works of art that seemed to understand the solver's mind. His model airplanes didn't just look realistic. They incorporated tiny mechanisms that made propellers spin with impossible precision. His rocking horses weren't just smooth and beautiful. They had subtle weight distributions that made even the tiniest toddler feel perfectly balanced and safe. The problem was, nobody seemed to want them. His parents, Linda and Robert Chen, owned a struggling hardware store downtown. They worked 16-hour days just to keep the lights on and put food on the table. When Marcus would eagerly present his latest creation at dinner, they'd offer distracted smiles and non-committal praise before quickly changing the subject to more practical matters. Homework, chores, or whether he'd considered joining a sport like normal kids his age. "That's nice, sweetheart," his mother would say, barely glancing up from the stack of unpaid invoices she was sorting through. "Maybe you could make something useful next time, like a pencil holder for your desk." Marcus would nod and smile, but inside, something would crack a little more each time. He'd pour weeks into crafting a musical jewelry box with tiny dancing figures that moved in perfect synchronization, only to find it relegated to a dusty shelf in his room within days. He'd spend his allowance on quality wood and hardware to build a sophisticated chess set with pieces that felt perfectly weighted in your hand, only to overhear his father telling his Uncle Phil that Marcus needed to, quote, focus on real skills that could actually get him a job someday. School wasn't much better. Millbrook Elementary was the kind of place where being good at standardized tests mattered more than creativity. Mrs. Patterson, his fourth-grade teacher, seemed genuinely annoyed when Marcus would finish his assignments early and start sketching improvements to the classroom's broken pencil sharpener, or designing a better system for organizing the art supplies. "Marcus, we're learning multiplication tables, not whatever this is," she'd say, confiscating his drawings. "You need to focus on what's actually important." The other kids were even worse. They didn't understand why Marcus would rather spend recess in the empty workshop classroom than playing kickball. They didn't get why he'd get excited about a broken mechanical toy that everyone else had thrown away. To them, Marcus was weird, and in the social ecosystem of elementary school, weird meant target. "Look, it's Marcus and his stupid wood chips," Jeremy Hoffman would sneer, leading his pack of followers past Marcus's desk. "What useless junk are you making today?" Marcus learned to keep his head down and his projects hidden. He'd work on them at home, in the privacy of his garage workshop, where his grandfather's old tools hung on the walls like trusted friends. But even there, the rejections hurt. When his Aunt Sarah visited for Christmas and Marcus excitedly showed her the intricate wooden puzzle he'd made specifically for her, she smiled politely and set it aside without even trying to solve it. "Oh, how creative," she said. "You know, Marcus, when I was your age, I was already thinking about what I wanted to be when I grew up. Have you thought about that? Maybe something in computers? That's where the money is these days." Quote, the puzzle box sat unopened on the coffee table for the rest of her visit, and Marcus watched as his mother quietly moved it to the donation pile after Sarah left. That became the pattern. Christmas gifts, birthday presents, random Tuesday surprises, they all followed the same trajectory. Initial polite acknowledgement, followed by benign neglect, followed by quiet disposal. Marcus would find his creations in garage sale boxes, donation bags, or sometimes just sitting by the curb on trash day. The day he found his intricately carved wooden train set, the one he'd spent 3 months perfecting, complete with working pistons and tiny cargo cars that actually latched together, sitting in a cardboard box marked free at the end of their driveway, something fundamental shifted inside him. He was 12 years old, standing there in his pajamas at 7 in the morning, staring at hundreds of hours of his work being offered to strangers. The train set had been his masterpiece, incorporating everything he'd learned about mechanics, craftsmanship, and design. Each car had been sanded to silk smoothness. Each joint had been fitted with the precision of a Swiss watch. The locomotive even had a tiny working whistle that played a perfect C-sharp when you pulled the cord. But there it was, marked as unwanted, waiting for someone, anyone, to see value in what his own family couldn't. Marcus salvaged what he could and retreated to his workshop. He started keeping his projects to himself entirely, working in secret during the late evening hours when everyone else was asleep. His parents probably thought he'd finally grown out of his phase. His teachers stopped confiscating sketches because he stopped making them in class. His classmates found new targets because Marcus had become virtually invisible. But in the quiet sanctuary of that garage workshop, surrounded by the smell of wood shavings and the gentle glow of a single workbench lamp, Marcus continued to create. He built because he had to, because something inside him demanded it, because even if no one else could see the beauty and purpose in his work, he knew it was there. He had no idea that this lonely period of rejection and isolation was preparing him for something extraordinary. He had no way of knowing that every discarded gift, every dismissive comment, every night spent working alone while the world slept, was building toward a moment when his strange talents would prove to be exactly what the world desperately needed. The boy who made things nobody wanted was about to become the man who made things nobody could live without. High school brought new challenges and unexpected opportunities for Marcus. Millbrook High was larger, more impersonal, and somehow that anonymity became his shield. While his classmates obsessed over social media followers and weekend parties, Marcus discovered the school's abandoned basement workshop, a relic from the 1970s when shop class was still mandatory. The room had been forgotten for years, filled with dusty equipment and broken machinery that the maintenance staff used for storage. But Marcus saw potential where others saw junk. He struck a deal with Mr. Rodriguez, the head custodian, to clean and organize the space in exchange for after-school access. What started as a simple arrangement became Marcus's salvation. In that basement sanctuary, surrounded by industrial-grade tools and proper ventilation systems, Marcus's skills exploded to new levels. He wasn't just carving wood anymore. He was welding metal, programming microcontrollers, and integrating electronics with mechanical systems. His creations evolved from beautiful toys to sophisticated devices that solved real problems. His first major breakthrough came during junior year when he noticed how much time the maintenance staff spent replacing broken door handles throughout the school. The standard hardware couldn't withstand the daily abuse from thousands of students, failing within months, and costing the district hundreds of dollars in replacements. Marcus spent 3 weeks designing a revolutionary door handle mechanism. Instead of using traditional springs and catches that wore out quickly, he developed a magnetic alignment system with self-lubricating bearings that could handle extreme stress while maintaining smooth operation. The prototype was elegant, durable, and cost a fraction of commercial alternatives. He presented it to Mr. Rodriguez, who was skeptical until he installed it on the most problematic door in the building, the main entrance to the cafeteria, which saw thousands of openings daily. 6 months later, while every other door handle in the school had been replaced at least once, Marcus's design still operated like new. Word spread quietly through the maintenance network. Soon, Marcus was fielding requests from other schools in the district. He wasn't selling his inventions. He was too young to navigate business licenses and contracts, but he was sharing his designs freely, watching his solutions spread throughout the region's educational facilities. The irony wasn't lost on him. At home, his parents still saw his workshop time as a distraction from serious pursuits like college preparation. They'd found his report cards impressive enough. Marcus maintained solid grades without much effort, but they constantly pushed him toward conventional paths. "Have you thought about engineering school?" his father would ask over dinner. "Your cousin Jake is making good money with his electrical engineering degree. Maybe you could do something like that." Marcus would nod politely, not mentioning that he'd already mastered more practical engineering skills than most college graduates. His parents saw his basement projects as hobbies, not realizing their son was quietly revolutionizing maintenance systems across 3 school districts. The contrast became even starker during his senior year when Mrs. Henderson, his AP physics teacher, noticed Marcus completing complex calculations in his head that other students struggled with using calculators. She started giving him independent research projects, impressed by his intuitive understanding of mechanical principles and materials science. "You have a rare gift," she told him after class one day. "Most people learn physics from textbooks. You seem to understand it from the inside out." But when Marcus excitedly shared Mrs. Henderson's praise at home, his mother's reaction was predictably lukewarm. "A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off." "That's nice, dear. Just make sure you're keeping your grades up in all your classes, not just the ones you like. College admissions are getting more competitive every year." The gift-giving disasters continued throughout high school, though Marcus had learned to lower his expectations. For his parents' 20th anniversary, he spent months crafting an intricate wooden jewelry box with hidden compartments and a music mechanism that played their wedding song. The craftsmanship was museum quality, with hand-carved roses and dovetail joints so precise they seemed impossible. His parents thanked him politely at the anniversary dinner, but Marcus later overheard his mother on the phone with his aunt. "It's beautiful, I suppose, but honestly, I just wish he'd focus that energy on something practical. We don't really have room for more decorative items." The jewelry box ended up in their bedroom closet, where it gathered dust alongside other masterpieces Marcus had created over the years. Meanwhile, in his basement workshop, Marcus was solving problems that had stumped professional engineers. When the school's ancient heating system kept failing during winter, leaving classrooms freezing, Marcus designed a supplemental circulation system using repurposed computer fans and custom-built ductwork. The solution cost less than $50 in materials and kept the entire building comfortable for the rest of the year. When the library's book security system broke down and replacement parts were discontinued, Marcus reverse-engineered the entire mechanism and created an improved version using modern components. Librarians from neighboring schools started visiting Millbrook just to see how their system worked so efficiently. His reputation grew within certain circles. Maintenance staff, technical teachers, and facility managers knew Marcus Chen as the kid who could fix anything. But in the broader world of his family and social peers, he remained invisible, his extraordinary abilities dismissed as quirky hobbies. The disconnect reached its peak during graduation season. While his classmates celebrated college acceptances and discussed their bright futures, Marcus faced increasing pressure to choose a career path. His parents had already started dropping hints about community college and learning a trade, not understanding that their son had already mastered trades that didn't officially exist yet. "Maybe you could become a contractor," his father suggested one evening. "There's always work in construction, and you're good with your hands." Marcus smiled and agreed, knowing there was no point in explaining that he'd already developed construction techniques that could revolutionize the industry. His innovations weren't dramatic enough for patents or publicity. They were practical improvements that worked so seamlessly, people took them for granted. As graduation approached, Marcus realized he was living a strange double life. In the daylight world of school and family, he was still the weird kid who made things nobody wanted. But in the shadows of basement workshops and maintenance rooms, he was becoming something else entirely. A problem solver whose quiet innovations were making life better for thousands of people who would never know his name. He had no way of knowing that this pattern of hidden excellence was about to collide with circumstances that would force the world to pay attention. The boy who fixed things in secret was about to face a challenge that would demand his skills be revealed to everyone. 3 months after graduation, Marcus found himself in limbo. His parents had enrolled him in the local community college's general studies program, convinced that 2 years there would help him figure out his direction. Meanwhile, Marcus spent his days attending classes that felt like retreading material he'd mastered years ago, and his evenings in the basement workshop, now more sophisticated than many professional facilities. The transformation of that space had been gradual but remarkable. What started as dusty storage had evolved into a precision engineering laboratory. Marcus had salvaged and refurbished industrial equipment from closed factories, built custom testing apparatus, and created a materials library that would make university labs envious. His latest projects involved integrating artificial intelligence with mechanical systems, work that was pushing the boundaries of several fields simultaneously. But the outside world remained oblivious to his capabilities. Even Dr. Patricia Williams, his engineering fundamentals professor at the community college, seemed more interested in teaching textbook theories than exploring practical applications. When Marcus submitted design solutions that exceeded the assignment requirements by orders of magnitude, she'd mark them down for being, quote, unnecessarily complex. The goal is to demonstrate understanding of basic principles, she explained after class one day, returning a project where Marcus had designed a water filtration system that was actually viable for disaster relief. You're making these assignments much harder than they need to be. Marcus nodded politely, but privately wondered if the education system was designed to suppress innovation rather than encourage it. He'd learned more in his basement workshop than in all his formal classes combined, yet somehow his autodidactic expertise counted for nothing in official circles. The breakthrough that would change everything began with a seemingly routine request. Mrs. Angela Foster, the emergency coordinator for Harrison County, had heard about Marcus through the maintenance network. Her department was struggling with a critical problem that had stumped multiple engineering firms and government contractors. The county's emergency communication system was failing. During severe weather events, when reliable communication became literally a matter of life and death, their radio towers consistently went dark. The existing backup systems were inadequate, and traditional solutions were prohibitively expensive for their limited budget. I know this might be a long shot, Mrs. Foster said when she visited Marcus's workshop on a rainy Thursday evening in October. But Jim Rodriguez at the high school says you're the person to call when impossible problems need solving. Marcus listened as she explained the technical challenges. The county's emergency services covered a geographically complex area, with mountains, valleys, and dead zones that made conventional radio communication unreliable. During emergencies, when power grids failed and cell towers went down, first responders often found themselves operating blind. Previous contractors had proposed solutions involving massive infrastructure investments, new towers, redundant power systems, and satellite uplinks that would cost millions of dollars the county didn't have. But Marcus saw the problem differently. Instead of fighting the geographical challenges, he proposed working with them. Over the next 6 weeks, he developed a revolutionary communication system that used the natural topology to create a self-healing network. His design incorporated low-power mesh nodes that could be rapidly deployed and automatically configured themselves based on local conditions. The brilliance was in the simplicity. Rather than requiring massive central towers, Marcus's system used hundreds of small, intelligent relay points that could adapt to changing conditions in real time. If one node failed, the network automatically rerouted communications through alternative paths. The entire system could run on solar power with battery backup, making it independent of the vulnerable electrical grid. But the real innovation was in the manufacturing approach. Marcus had designed every component to be producible using readily available materials and basic fabrication techniques. Instead of requiring specialized industrial facilities, his communication nodes could be assembled in any reasonably equipped workshop, including his own basement. Mrs. Foster was initially skeptical. She'd worked with enough contractors to be wary of solutions that seemed too good to be true. But when Marcus demonstrated a working prototype network covering the entire county building complex, her skepticism evaporated. "This is incredible," she said, watching real-time communication flow seamlessly between test units placed throughout the building. How did you solve the power regulation problem? Every other contractor said it was impossible without dedicated high-voltage lines. Marcus showed her his custom power management circuits, explaining how they could harvest energy from multiple sources simultaneously while maintaining stable output under varying conditions. The technical explanation was complex, but the results were undeniable. His system worked better than anything she'd seen from major defense contractors. Word of Marcus's communication system spread quickly through emergency management networks. Within weeks, he was fielding calls from counties across 3 states, all facing similar communication challenges with limited budgets. But Marcus wasn't interested in becoming a contractor or starting a business. He was more fascinated by the engineering challenges than the commercial opportunities. That attitude puzzled many of the officials who contacted him. They were prepared to pay substantial sums for his expertise, but Marcus seemed more interested in sharing his designs freely than profiting from them. He published detailed technical specifications online, created instructional videos for assembly and deployment, and even established a forum where other engineers could suggest improvements. Most people would be trying to patent this technology and make millions, Mrs. Foster observed during one of their regular check-ins. Why are you just giving it away? Marcus shrugged. If it helps save lives, what's the point of keeping it secret? The problems are more interesting than the profits. His parents remained largely unaware of these developments. They knew Marcus was some technical project, but they assumed it was volunteer work similar to his high school maintenance activities. When local officials started visiting their house to discuss implementation details, his parents treated them politely but didn't fully grasp the significance of their son's work. It's nice that Marcus is staying busy, his mother mentioned to her sister during a phone call, though I do wish he'd focus more on his college classes. His advisor says he's not applying himself properly. The irony was becoming almost surreal. While Marcus was revolutionizing emergency communications for an entire region, his academic advisor was concerned about his lack of engagement with introductory coursework. While government officials were seeking his expertise on critical infrastructure projects, his parents worried that he wasn't developing marketable skills. But none of that mattered on the night of November 15th, when nature provided the ultimate test of Marcus's innovations. A massive storm system, unprecedented in the region's recorded history, was bearing down on Harrison County with winds exceeding 100 miles per hour and the potential for catastrophic flooding. As the first emergency warnings began broadcasting across Marcus's communication network, neither he nor anyone else realized they were about to witness the moment when hidden genius would be forced into the spotlight, transforming the quiet inventor into a figure the entire nation would come to know. The storm arrived with a violence that caught even experienced meteorologists off guard. Hurricane-force winds tore through Harrison County at 2:47 a.m., turning trees into projectiles and buildings into debris fields. Within the first hour, the electrical grid collapsed entirely, plunging 60,000 residents into darkness, just as flooding began to surge through low-lying areas. Marcus was awake in his basement workshop when the power died. He'd been monitoring weather reports and had spent the previous day conducting final checks on his communication network, ensuring all nodes were fully charged and properly configured. As emergency sirens wailed outside, he activated his master control station, a sophisticated command center he'd built to coordinate the mesh network across the county. While the rest of Millbrook stumbled through their houses searching for flashlights, Marcus watched his screens display a real-time map of the disaster unfolding. His communication nodes, scattered across the county like an invisible web, were automatically switching to emergency power and reconfiguring themselves to maintain connectivity as cell towers toppled and landline infrastructure failed. The first distress call came at 3:15 a.m. from Riverside Elementary School, where 3 families had taken shelter in what they thought was a safe building. The school sat in a flood zone, and rising waters were now threatening the structure's foundation. Under normal circumstances, this emergency would have gone unnoticed until daylight. The area was in a communication dead zone that traditional radio systems couldn't penetrate. But Marcus's mesh network routed the distress signal through 17 different nodes, delivering it clearly to the county emergency center, Within minutes, rescue teams were dispatched with precise GPS coordinates, guided by the same network that had detected the emergency. Marcus found himself serving as an unofficial communications coordinator, his basement workshop transformed into the nerve center for county-wide rescue operations. His system wasn't just working, it was performing beyond even his own expectations. As traditional infrastructure crumbled, his network adapted, finding new pathways and maintaining connections that kept emergency responders in constant contact. The night became a blur of coordinated rescues. When flash flooding trapped a family in their car on Highway 42, Marcus's network guided rescue boats to their exact location through complete darkness. When an elderly man suffered a heart attack in the isolated hilltop community of Pine Ridge, paramedics navigated treacherous roads, using turn-by-turn directions transmitted through nodes that conventional wisdom said couldn't possibly reach that elevation. But the most dramatic rescue began at dawn when the Millbrook Dam showed signs of catastrophic failure. The structure, built in the 1960s, wasn't designed to handle the volume of water now pressing against it. If it collapsed, the resulting flood would devastate everything downstream, including the county hospital where dozens of patients couldn't be evacuated. Traditional communication systems would have left emergency crews operating blind in this situation. Radio dead zones around the dam made coordination nearly impossible, and the hospital sat in another communication shadow created by the surrounding hills. Previous emergency plans had acknowledged this limitation, essentially accepting that a dam failure scenario would result in massive casualties due to coordination failures. Marcus's network changed everything. His nodes provided seamless communication between dam engineers, evacuation teams, and hospital staff. As cracks appeared in the dam structure, emergency personnel could coordinate precision evacuations based on real-time structural assessments and flood modeling. The evacuation itself became a masterpiece of coordination. Hospital patients were moved to upper floors based on precise flood predictions transmitted through the network. Evacuation routes were adjusted dynamically as Marcus's system detected road blockages and suggested alternatives. Emergency vehicles navigated through debris-filled streets, using GPS coordinates refined by local mesh nodes that could detect obstacles invisible to satellites. When the dam finally gave way at 11:23 a.m., the evacuation was complete. The flood that roared through downtown Millbrook destroyed hundreds of buildings and vehicles, but claimed no lives. Emergency responders had been positioned optimally based on flood models transmitted through Marcus's network, ready to assist anyone caught by the rising waters. The aftermath revealed the full scope of what Marcus's innovation had accomplished. While neighboring counties struggled with communication blackouts and coordination failures that hampered their emergency responses, Harrison County had maintained seamless connectivity throughout the disaster. Search and rescue operations that should have taken days were completed in hours. Medical emergencies that would normally have gone undetected were handled promptly. Mrs. Foster, who had worked emergency management for 15 years, had never seen anything like it. Traditional disasters created chaos, partly because emergency services couldn't communicate effectively. But Marcus's network had eliminated that chaos, transforming a potentially catastrophic situation into a coordinated response that saved dozens of lives. "I've managed responses to hurricanes, tornadoes, and ice storms," she told Marcus as they surveyed the damage the following afternoon. "I've watched people die because we couldn't get information where it needed to go fast enough. What you built didn't just help with this emergency. It revolutionized how emergency response works." The numbers were staggering. In surrounding counties without Marcus's communication infrastructure, the same storm had resulted in 17 fatalities and hundreds of injuries, mostly due to delayed or misdirected emergency responses. Harrison County, despite bearing the brunt of the storm's fury, had suffered property damage but no loss of life. Local news crews began arriving by midday, initially focused on documenting the storm damage. But as they interviewed emergency responders and disaster victims, a different story emerged. Everyone mentioned the same thing: how remarkably well coordinated the rescue efforts had been, how emergency personnel seemed to know exactly where help was needed and how to get there. "It was like they had eyes everywhere," explained Janet Morrison, whose family had been rescued from their flooded home. The rescue boat found us in complete darkness, in an area where cell phones didn't work. Somehow, they knew exactly where we were and how to reach us safely. When reporters pressed for details about this mysterious coordination capability, they kept hearing the same name, Marcus Chen, the quiet community college student who had somehow single-handedly solved communication problems that had plagued emergency services for decades. As news crews began seeking out Marcus for interviews, his parents finally began to grasp the magnitude of what their son had accomplished. The boy whose gifts they had dismissed as impractical hobbies had just orchestrated the most successful disaster response in regional history, using technology he had developed in their basement. The first television crew arrived at the Chen family's modest house on Elm Street at 6:30 a.m., 3 days after the storm. Marcus was in the garage, quietly repairing several network nodes that had been damaged by flying debris, when his mother knocked on the workshop door with a bewildered expression. "There are reporters outside," Linda Chen said, her voice carrying a mixture of confusion and concern. "They're asking to speak with you about some kind of communication system. They say you're responsible for saving lives during the storm." Marcus looked up from the circuit board he was soldering, unsurprised but dreading what was about to unfold. He'd known this moment would eventually come. His network's performance during the disaster had been too visible, too successful to remain anonymous. But he'd hoped for more time to prepare for the attention. What he hadn't anticipated was the sheer scale of that attention. By noon, his quiet neighborhood street was lined with news vans from regional television stations, national cable networks, and even international media outlets. The story had spread through emergency management circles with unprecedented speed, carried by officials who had never seen disaster coordination work so flawlessly. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency's Technology Division, had driven down from Washington, D.C. overnight after reading preliminary reports from Harrison County. She'd spent 20 years working on emergency communication systems, overseeing hundreds of millions in federal contracts aimed at solving exactly the problems Marcus had addressed in his basement. "I need to understand what happened here," she told Mrs. Foster during an emergency briefing at the county offices. "Our best contractors have been working on mesh communication networks for a decade, spending tens of millions on research and development. The preliminary reports suggest someone has achieved breakthrough results using off-the-shelf components and a budget that wouldn't cover our morning coffee." Mrs. Foster had arranged for Marcus to meet with Dr. Martinez privately, away from the media circus surrounding his house. The meeting took place in the county's Emergency Operations Center, where Marcus's communication network was still running, providing ongoing support for storm recovery efforts. Dr. Martinez arrived expecting to meet an experienced engineer, possibly someone with advanced degrees who had been working quietly for a defense contractor or technology firm. Instead, she found a 19-year-old community college student who looked more comfortable discussing technical specifications than handling the attention his work had generated. "Walk me through the architecture," she said, studying the network monitoring displays that Marcus had set up. "I want to understand how you achieved this level of redundancy and self-optimization." For the next 3 hours, Marcus explained his design philosophy, demonstrating how the network's artificial intelligence algorithms managed power distribution, signal routing, and automatic reconfiguration. Dr. Martinez found herself taking notes frantically, recognizing innovations that could revolutionize not just emergency communications, but civilian and military networks worldwide. "The mesh topology isn't new," Marcus explained, pulling up schematics on his laptop. "What's different is the predictive routing algorithms. Instead of just responding to network failures, the system anticipates them based on environmental conditions, power levels, and signal quality trends." Dr. Martinez nodded, but privately she was astounded. The theoretical framework Marcus was describing casually represented years of advanced research. His implementation solved problems that entire university departments struggled with, using approaches that seemed obvious only after he explained them. "Where did you learn this?" she asked. "What's your background in network engineering and artificial intelligence?" Marcus shrugged. "Mostly trial and error. I had access to some decent equipment and time to experiment. The AI components started as simple optimization scripts, but they evolved as I tested different scenarios. The casualness of his response only deepened Dr. Martinez's amazement. The decent equipment Marcus mentioned turned out to be an impressive array of instruments he'd built or refurbished himself. The simple optimization scripts represented machine learning implementations that outperformed systems developed by major technology companies. Meanwhile, outside the government meetings, Marcus's story was taking on a life of its own in the media. Television crews had interviewed dozens of people whose lives had been saved by the communication network, creating a narrative of the unrecognized genius whose innovations had prevented a regional catastrophe. The contrast was striking. Video footage showed emergency responders praising the seamless coordination that had made their jobs possible, while interviews with Marcus's family revealed years of dismissing his gifts as impractical hobbies. The wooden train set that had once sat marked "free" at the end of their driveway became a symbol of how extraordinary talent could be overlooked by those closest to it. His parents found themselves in the surreal position of watching national news anchors describe their son as a technological innovator, while they struggled to reconcile this image with the quiet teenager who had spent years working alone in their garage. The gifts they had donated or discarded were now being discussed as early indicators of exceptional creative intelligence. "I had no idea," his father admitted to a CNN reporter. "Marcus was always making things, but I thought they were just toys. I never realized he was developing real engineering skills." The revelation was particularly painful for his mother, who discovered during live television interviews that several of Marcus's childhood creations had been revolutionary in ways she'd never understood. The musical jewelry box she'd relegated to a closet shelf incorporated mechanical programming techniques that wouldn't be commercially available for another decade. The chess set with perfectly weighted pieces used material science principles that NASA was still researching. But the most dramatic moment came when Dr. Martinez called an impromptu press conference to announce that the federal government was immediately implementing Marcus's communication system as a national emergency preparedness standard. The technology that had been developed by a teenager in his parents' garage was being adopted as the foundation for America's next-generation disaster response infrastructure. This represents the most significant advancement in emergency communications in the past 50 years, Dr. Martinez announced to the assembled media. Mr. Chen has single-handedly solved problems that have challenged our best engineers and consumed enormous resources. His system saved lives during the Harrison County disaster, and we believe it will save thousands more as we deploy it nationally. The announcement transformed Marcus from a local news story into a national phenomenon. Major universities scrambled to offer him full scholarships and research positions. Technology companies began bidding for consulting contracts. The Pentagon requested briefings on potential military applications of his work. Yet through all the attention and accolades, Marcus remained focused on the technical challenges rather than the recognition. When reporters asked about his feelings regarding his family's previous dismissal of his gifts, he deflected with characteristic humility. "They weren't trying to hurt me," he said during his first formal television interview. "They just didn't understand what I was working on. Most people see the world differently than I do, and that's okay. What matters is that the technology works when people need it." But privately, Marcus was processing emotions more complex than his public statements suggested. Years of having his innovations dismissed as worthless had left deeper scars than he'd admitted, even to himself. The validation felt overwhelming, arriving so suddenly that he struggled to believe it was real. As media crews finally began leaving Millbrook and the immediate frenzy subsided, Marcus faced a new challenge, deciding what to do with the opportunities flooding his way, while navigating the complicated feelings surrounding his family's belated recognition of his extraordinary gifts. 6 weeks after the storm, Marcus Chen stood on the stage of the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in America. The ceremony was broadcast live across all major networks, watched by millions who had followed his remarkable story from basement inventor to national hero. President Thompson's speech highlighted the profound impact of Marcus's innovations. In a single night, this young man's ingenuity prevented what could have been one of the most devastating natural disasters in our nation's history. His selfless dedication to sharing his knowledge freely has already saved lives in 17 states and 4 countries. The statistics were indeed staggering. Marcus's communication system had been rapidly deployed to disaster-prone regions across the globe, preventing communication blackouts during Hurricane Sophia in Florida, coordinating earthquake response in California, and maintaining connectivity during severe flooding in Bangladesh. The open-source nature of his designs had accelerated deployment far beyond what any commercial system could have achieved. But perhaps the most significant change wasn't in the technology itself. It was in how the world now viewed innovation and talent recognition. Marcus's story had sparked a national conversation about how extraordinary abilities could be overlooked, dismissed, or undervalued by the very institutions and families meant to nurture them. Educational systems began implementing new approaches to identify and support unconventional learners. The Chen Protocol, as educators called it, focused on recognizing practical problem-solving abilities rather than traditional academic metrics. Students who might have been labeled as unfocused or impractical were now encouraged to pursue independent projects and real-world applications of their interests. Major corporations restructured their hiring practices, realizing that some of the most valuable innovations might come from unexpected sources. Google, Apple, and Microsoft established alternative pathway programs specifically designed to identify talent that traditional recruitment methods might miss. The basement workshop where Marcus had developed his breakthrough technology became a pilgrimage site for executives seeking to understand how profound innovation could emerge from humble beginnings. For Marcus personally, the transformation was both exhilarating and overwhelming. Stanford University had created a unique position for him, Director of Applied Innovation, that allowed him to pursue research without the constraints of traditional academic programs. His new laboratory, funded by a coalition of technology companies and government agencies, gave him resources beyond anything he could have imagined during his years of solitary work. The lab itself was a marvel, featuring equipment worth millions of dollars, and a team of graduate students eager to learn from someone who had revolutionized their field before reaching his 20th birthday. But Marcus insisted on maintaining a workshop area that resembled his original basement setup, complete with hand tools and salvaged components that reminded him of where his journey had begun. His family relationships had undergone their own complex evolution. His parents, initially overwhelmed by the sudden attention and accolades, gradually came to terms with the magnitude of what they had failed to recognize. The process wasn't easy. Years of dismissive attitudes couldn't be erased overnight, and the guilt of having thrown away or donated Marcus's creations weighed heavily on them. "I keep thinking about that train set," his mother confided to a family counselor they'd started seeing together. "He spent months on it, and I put it out on the curb like it was garbage. How do you apologize for something like that?" The counselor, Sarah Kim, specialized in families dealing with exceptional children and the unique challenges that arose when extraordinary abilities weren't recognized or supported. She helped the Chen family understand that their experience was more common than most people realized. Exceptional talent often appears in forms that don't match societal expectations, Dr. Kim explained. Parents are conditioned to value certain types of achievement while overlooking others. The important thing now is learning from this experience and rebuilding your relationship with understanding and support. Marcus himself approached the family healing process with the same systematic thinking he applied to technical problems. He understood that his parents' reactions had come from limited perspectives rather than malicious intent. Their hardware store background had taught them to value practical, immediate solutions, making it difficult to recognize the long-term potential in his seemingly abstract projects. "They weren't wrong to push me toward practical skills," Marcus told a journalist from Time magazine, which had named him Person of the Year. "They were just working with incomplete information. Engineering and innovation need both visionary thinking and practical application. Maybe I needed their grounding influence as much as they needed to see my perspective." The reconciliation process included moments of profound revelation. When his parents finally visited his Stanford laboratory and saw the sophisticated equipment and international recognition their son had achieved, they began to understand the trajectory that had been invisible to them for years. The basement workshop they had viewed as a distraction was revealed as an incubation chamber for world-changing innovations. His father, Robert, spent hours in the laboratory, asking detailed questions about the communication networks and trying to comprehend the mathematical principles underlying the systems. "I always thought you were just playing with gadgets," he admitted. "I never realized you were solving problems that professional engineers couldn't figure out." But the most meaningful moment came when Marcus presented his parents with a special gift during Christmas of that year. It was a replica of the wooden train set they had once put out for free pickup, recreated with exact precision from memory and enhanced with modern electronics that made it fully functional as a demonstration model for engineering students. "I wanted you to have this," Marcus said as they unwrapped the carefully crafted package. "Not because I'm trying to make you feel guilty about the original, but because I want you to understand that every gift I ever made came from love. The fact that you couldn't see their value doesn't diminish that love." His mother wept as she examined the intricate craftsmanship, recognizing details that had been present in the original but had gone unnoticed. The tiny working pistons, the precision joints, the careful attention to balance and proportion. It was all there, just as it had been years earlier when they'd failed to appreciate it. The train set now occupied a place of honor in their living room, where visitors could see both the exceptional craftsmanship and understand the larger story it represented. It became a symbol of second chances, of learning to see value where it might initially be overlooked, and of the possibility for families to grow beyond their initial limitations. Marcus's public speaking engagements increasingly focused on these themes of recognition and support for unconventional talent. He established the Hidden Innovators Foundation, which provided resources for young inventors working outside traditional educational systems. The foundation's motto, "Every discarded gift might save the world," resonated with audiences who had their own stories of overlooked potential. As his first year of national prominence drew to a close, Marcus reflected on the strange journey from rejected gift-maker to celebrated innovator. The attention was gratifying, but what mattered most was knowing that his story had opened doors for others whose talents might otherwise remain hidden. The basement workshops and garage laboratories scattered across the country now represented possibility rather than mere hobby spaces. The boy who had once watched his creations being marked free and left on curbs had become the man who reminded the world that extraordinary solutions often come from the most unexpected places, waiting patiently for someone to recognize their true value. 2 years after receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom, Marcus Chen found himself in an unexpected place, testifying before Congress about the urgent need to reform how America identifies and nurtures exceptional talent. The hearing room was packed with educators, technology leaders, and families whose lives had been touched by stories similar to his own. The question before us today isn't just about recognizing individual genius, Marcus told the assembled committee. It's about understanding that our nation's future depends on creating systems that can identify and support innovation wherever it emerges, even when it doesn't look like what we expect. The statistics he presented were sobering. Research conducted by his Hidden Innovators Foundation had identified thousands of young people across America whose extraordinary abilities were being overlooked or actively discouraged by conventional, educational, and social structures. These weren't just isolated cases. They represented a systematic failure to recognize talent that didn't conform to traditional patterns. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, a cognitive scientist from MIT who had studied Marcus's case extensively, provided additional context. What we've learned from Mr. Chen's story is that exceptional practical intelligence often develops outside formal educational frameworks. These individuals solve real-world problems intuitively, but their methods don't align with standard academic assessments. The congressional hearing had been prompted by a remarkable discovery. As Marcus's communication system was deployed globally, engineers began finding other innovative solutions that had been developed independently by unknown inventors working in similar isolation. A teenager in rural Montana had created a water purification system superior to anything produced by major manufacturers. A high school dropout in Detroit had revolutionized battery technology in his apartment. An elderly woman in Alaska had developed sustainable heating solutions that outperformed industrial designs. Each case followed a familiar pattern: extraordinary innovation emerging from unconventional circumstances, initially dismissed or ignored by established institutions, and only recognized after achieving undeniable results. The Hidden Innovators Foundation had documented over 300 such cases in just 18 months of research. Senator Patricia Williams, who chaired the committee, was particularly interested in the economic implications. Mr. Chen, can you quantify the potential impact of better identifying and supporting these hidden innovators? Marcus pulled up a presentation that his team had prepared with economists from Harvard Business School. Conservative estimates suggest that systematic talent identification could accelerate innovation timelines by 15 to 20 years across multiple industries. The communication system that saved lives during the Harrison County disaster could have been developed and deployed a decade earlier if proper support systems had existed. The economic analysis was staggering. The researchers had identified dozens of current global challenges, from climate change to medical diagnostics to infrastructure resilience, where breakthrough solutions might already exist in the workshops and minds of overlooked innovators. The opportunity cost of failing to recognize these talents was measured not just in dollars, but in lives that could be saved and problems that could be solved years ahead of schedule. But the hearing also addressed more personal dimensions of the talent recognition crisis. Dr. Maria Santos, a family counselor who specialized in gifted children, testified about the psychological impact of having exceptional abilities dismissed or undervalued. The emotional damage can be profound and lasting, Dr. Santos explained. When children repeatedly experience their best efforts being treated as worthless or impractical, they often stop trying altogether. We're not just losing innovations, we're losing the innovators themselves. Marcus nodded as he listened to her testimony, remembering his own struggles with feeling invisible and undervalued. The Foundation's research had found that many potential innovators abandoned their interests entirely after years of discouragement, choosing conventional paths that felt safer but left their unique talents unused. The solution Marcus proposed to Congress was comprehensive but achievable. The Innovation Recognition Initiative would establish identification protocols in schools, create mentorship networks connecting young inventors with experienced engineers, and provide funding for unconventional projects that showed promise, despite falling outside traditional research categories. We're not asking you to revolutionize the entire educational system overnight, Marcus explained. We're asking you to create parallel pathways that can identify and support the students who don't thrive in conventional environments, but who might change the world if given the right opportunities. Quote, the proposal included provisions for community workshops, online collaboration platforms, and a national database of mentors willing to work with young inventors. Perhaps most importantly, it established legal protections for educators who wanted to support unconventional student projects without facing administrative pushback. Following the congressional hearing, Marcus returned to his laboratory at Stanford, where his work had expanded far beyond communication systems. His team was now developing solutions for urban planning, renewable energy, and space exploration, all using the same principles of practical innovation that had guided his basement experiments years earlier. But the project closest to his heart was the Millbrook Innovation Center, a facility he was building in his hometown that would serve as a model for supporting young inventors. The center occupied the former site of his parents' hardware store, which had finally closed after 40 years of struggling against larger competitors. It feels right to put something here that celebrates practical innovation, Marcus told the local newspaper during the groundbreaking ceremony. This was where I first learned to appreciate tools and materials, even if my parents didn't understand what I was building with them. The Innovation Center would provide access to professional-grade equipment, expert mentorship, and funding for promising projects. But Marcus insisted on maintaining the same open, experimental atmosphere that had characterized his basement workshop. Young inventors would be encouraged to pursue their interests without predetermined outcomes, free to explore solutions that might not make sense to conventional thinking. His parents had become unexpected advocates for the center's mission. Linda Chen now served on the board of directors, using her business experience to help young inventors understand the practical aspects of bringing ideas to market. Robert Chen managed the facility's workshop spaces, teaching traditional skills while encouraging creative applications. I wish we had understood then what we understand now, Linda reflected during the center's opening celebration. But maybe Marcus needed to develop his independence and determination. Maybe our limitations helped him become stronger. The relationship between Marcus and his parents had evolved into something deeper than simple reconciliation. They had become partners in a mission to ensure that other families wouldn't repeat their mistakes. Their story was featured in parenting magazines and family counseling programs as an example of how relationships could heal and grow, even after fundamental misunderstandings. During the Innovation Center's first year, it supported 47 young inventors working on projects ranging from assistive technologies for disabled individuals to sustainable farming solutions for urban environments. Several of these projects had already attracted attention from major corporations and government agencies, validating Marcus's belief that exceptional innovation was far more common than most people realized. One of the center's first success stories involved Emma Rodriguez, a 15-year-old whose parents had been concerned about her obsession with creating elaborate mechanical contraptions instead of focusing on traditional academics. Working with center mentors, Emma developed a robotic system for harvesting delicate fruits that revolutionized agricultural automation. "My parents used to hide my tools because they thought I was wasting time," Emma said during a presentation at the center's annual showcase. "Now they understand that what looked like playing was actually solving real problems. Marcus showed me that being different isn't something to apologize for." The showcase had become a major annual event, attracting visitors from around the world who wanted to see grassroots innovation in action. Technology executives, university researchers, and government officials came to Millbrook to witness demonstrations of breakthrough technologies developed by teenagers and young adults working in environments that celebrated unconventional thinking. Marcus's keynote address at the third annual showcase reflected on how profoundly the world had changed since that night, when his communication network had saved lives during the Great Storm. 3 years ago, I was a community college student whose family thought his hobbies were impractical distractions, he told the assembled audience. Today, variations of those hobbies are protecting lives in over 40 countries. The lesson isn't about my personal journey. It's about how many other extraordinary solutions are waiting to be recognized and supported. Quote, "The audience included several families whose stories mirrored his own. Parents who had initially dismissed their children's unconventional interests, but had learned to recognize and nurture exceptional abilities. Teachers who had implemented new approaches to identify students whose talents didn't align with standard curricula. Business leaders who had discovered breakthrough innovations in unexpected places." But perhaps the most meaningful presence was his grandfather David, now 91 years old, who had traveled from his assisted living facility to attend the event. It was David who had first introduced Marcus to woodworking in that garage workshop so many years earlier, unknowingly setting in motion the chain of events that would transform emergency communications worldwide. "I always knew Marcus was special," David said during a brief interview with local news. "But I thought it was just because he could make beautiful things with his hands. I had no idea those hands would end up saving so many lives." As the showcase concluded and visitors began departing, Marcus walked through the Innovation Center's workshops, observing young inventors absorbed in their projects. The scene reminded him of his own teenage years, working alone in the basement while the world above remained oblivious to the potential being developed in isolation. But these young people weren't working alone. They had mentors, resources, and, most importantly, recognition that their unusual interests might lead to extraordinary contributions. The culture of dismissal and discouragement that had characterized his own experience was being replaced by one of curiosity and support. The transformation wasn't complete. There were still countless young innovators working in isolation, still families struggling to understand children whose minds operated differently, still educational systems that valued conformity over creativity. But the conversation had fundamentally shifted. Marcus's story had become a catalyst for broader recognition that innovation often emerges from the margins, developed by individuals whose approaches don't match conventional expectations. Late that evening, as Marcus locked up the Innovation Center and prepared to return to his laboratory at Stanford, he paused in front of a display case containing some of his earliest creations. The wooden train set he had recreated for his parents sat alongside the original puzzle boxes and musical mechanisms that had once been dismissed as impractical hobbies. A small plaque beside the display read, "Every discarded gift might save the world. Every overlooked talent might change everything." The question isn't whether extraordinary abilities exist. It's whether we're wise enough to recognize them. Marcus smiled as he read the words, remembering the 7-year-old boy who had first picked up a piece of wood in his grandfather's garage, driven by an inexplicable need to create something better than what already existed. That boy had grown into a man who had indeed changed the world, but perhaps more importantly, had helped create systems to ensure that other overlooked gifts would be recognized and nurtured. The basement workshop where it all began was now a museum, visited by thousands of young inventors each year who drew inspiration from the simple tools and humble beginnings that had produced world-changing innovations. The message was clear. Extraordinary solutions could emerge from anywhere, developed by anyone willing to persist, despite discouragement and dismissal. As Marcus drove home through the quiet streets of Millbrook, past houses where other young innovators might be working late into the night on projects their families didn't yet understand, he felt a deep satisfaction. The boy whose gifts had been thrown away had become the man who ensured that future gifts would be treasured, supported, and given the chance to flourish. The story that had begun with rejection and dismissal had become a legacy of recognition and possibility, proving that sometimes the most profound changes start not with grand announcements or institutional programs, but with one person refusing to give up on ideas that others couldn't yet see the value in creating. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.